I can't tell if they're an obvious hacker. Because the numbers are reasonable, but still outrageous.
Butterscotch Shenanigans. Hey everybody, welcome to episode 167 of Coffee with Butterscotch, the GameDev comedy podcast, Butterscotch Shenanigans. I'm Seth, and I'm the games programmer.
I'm Adam, and I have dry eyeballs.
I'm Sam, and I'm the game artiste.
And this is a show where we talk about life, business, and working in the games industry. Today is August Fishy Bait, Sinky Boat Lean. Before we get started, we have a warning. Oh, that's August 28, 2018. For
yes.
those.
Gotcha, okay. Obviously.
That was incomprehensible for. Before we get started, we have a warning. Anything can happen on this show. There's going to be profanity, and we're going to talk about adult types of stuff like business. So if you're a child, then go away or stick around and learn swears in business. It's kind of up to you. All right, so this week is actually a day after yesterday's podcast.
Everything is confusing.
So we are pre-recording this because we're going to be at PAX for the next 6 days.
For a while.
But also, we were at PAX when you listened to this. For the last 6 days.
When you listen to this, we will have just gotten back from PAX.
That's what I mean. We were at PAX.
So just like how yesterday, last week's
I think they get it, you know?
Anyway, this is pre-recorded, and so we don't have any news because we already talked about the news in the most recent episode.
Also, we don't know what has happened yet.
We don't know what has happened, so instead of our normal wild speculation, we're going to just go ahead and get right into listener questions.
It's going to be a listener question episode.
Yeah, so these questions come from podcast.bscotch.net. That's all I have to say about that. Let's get started. All right, first question comes from CDC Molly. This is actually not a question. This is a compliment. So brace your humbleness.
Wait, is this the Centers for Disease Control?
Yeah. CDC Mully says, "Hey, B-Bros, every couple of months at work, we have to give a little presentation in a morning meeting for the whole building. I had just listened to your podcast where you talked about maximizing and satisficing, and I've been working on that in my day-to-day. So I spoke on that for my presentation on Tuesday. Thanks for everything you guys do. Keep it up."
Did it go well?
Nice.
That's my question.
He just did it. Right. You know, he satisficed the presentation. And he
satisficed in this question, too.
Yeah, he thought, I can't make the perfect presentation, but I can make a one. I can make one.
I believe we followed up that episode the next week where we then argued a little bit about what we meant by satisficing.
Yes.
And so now I'm curious, did you listen to the follow-up before putting this presentation together? And if you didn't, and then did listen to it afterwards,
were you horrified?
Yeah, I would like a follow-up.
I need more details.
Give us more information. Although there is a character limit on those questions.
That's true, but it is higher now.
So
I don't know how high, but higher.
All right, well, CDC Molly, get back in there and give us a follow-up.
Yep.
We'll see and we want to know.
People want to know.
Did it go perfectly or did it just go acceptably well? All right. First question comes from Woland77. You are all very positive and passionate people, and a lot of your messages are about getting the most out of life. A lot of people use video games to escape life and delete time. How do you feel about the possibility that people are using your video games to escape life at the cost of engaging with life and with themselves?
So I think we've talked about this before, but we actually harvest the time created by the video games for ourselves.
Like vampires.
Yeah, we're time vampires.
Yeah.
So I feel personally fantastic about it.
I feel very healthy and youthful.
Yes.
I feel super unhealthy, but imagine how it would feel if we weren't
stealing souls.
Adam would be aging
so
rapidly.
A wrinkly husk.
Yeah.
No, I think we've actually talked about this internally a bit, and I think this goes back to, I don't remember if it was yesterday or last week, something we talked about why make games, generally speaking. And while it certainly is true that people use them for escapism to a degree, or even to a large degree, sometimes you do need to escape from things. Just as sort of a general fact.
Well, not only that, but I think I believe that you could say the same thing about anything that's a simulation, whether it's tennis, whether it's watching the latest superhero movie, whether it's running a marathon.
Honestly, I mean, we've talked about this before about even the news nowadays being a form of entertainment for people, whether or not you view it as such. The reality is
weirdly the news is an escape from reality.
Because it's an escape from your current local problems in a very real sense, right? So if you're keeping up on all of the just general insanity that's going on every single day, to a large degree, you're kind of treading water.
Then this begs the question: what is reality? Because it kind of sounds like everything is an escape from reality.
Well, yeah, reality is when you're just alone with your thoughts and realizing I'm gonna die soon, and my impact will have meant nothing to the grander universe.
Okay.
So no matter what you do,
that's reality.
Maybe that's reality.
Pure,
in its purest
unadulterated form. Reality.
It's pretty dark.
So anything
I like how this question started like you're pretty positive people. We're like, it's just because we know we're gonna die.
Well, we have this. There's a great. What's that weird YouTube channel where they talk about philosophy?
Curse the Gats.
Yeah. So they have this great episode about.
I don't know what you just said.
Exactly. No one does.
This episode about optimistic nihilism.
Yes.
Where you are both recognizing that nothing really matters that much, and you were dead a lot longer than you've been alive, and that's going to also be true in the future, right? And even the things that are super important that you do now will basically be forgotten within like a generation.
Yeah. If you're lucky, you got maybe like 100 years of sort of some form of stardom,
Yeah. And if you think about like all the people who you could list of like, oh, these people are super important and have made a huge impact on the world, I bet almost all of them are within the last couple hundred years.
Yeah.
Even though people have been around for hundreds of thousands of years, right? And so, just don't worry about it.
Well, so the thing with optimistic nihilism, so nihilism is just that, which is like nothing matters. The optimistic part is because nothing matters, you're free. You're free.
Yeah,
you're free to do whatever you want. It's going to be good because you can just make it super good and you can concentrate on your local sphere of impact, which I think is kind of what this comes down to. So escaping,
you can take it either in the demotivating or the motivating.
Well, we talk about this with knowledge too, right? Because once you acknowledge that you can't know anything, then you can either be like, well, fuck it, it's not even worth trying to learn or whatever. Or you can say, hell yeah, now I can just go explore the universe and not worry about whether I'm right or wrong because I'm just always wrong. And so my goal is just to
be slightly more right.
Is to be slightly more right. Now I get to have an attitude where it's just fine to be wrong. Not on purpose, obviously, but fine to be wrong because you have no choice and just try to be more right over time.
Well, so tying this back
and
to
you take joy in the journey.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So what does this mean as far as how do you feel about what we do being a thing that people use to, like I said, escape from reality or to, pad their time?
I think as long as we don't intentionally trap people in the stuff that we make, as in using straight up gambling mechanics and that sort of thing, right?
To siphon their bank accounts and everything else.
Yeah, as long as we don't do that kind of stuff so that people are truly kind of opting into the experience and then only engaging with it because they're getting something valuable to them out of it, instead of us sort of hijacking a thing that does truly just burn somebody else's time, then I feel perfectly fine about what we're doing because then people get to opt in. And I think it just is true that it's not even this whole idea of like escaping versus not escaping or whatever. It's just, we're all just doing stuff.
Yeah, and you actually have quite a bit of time on your hands.
Yeah.
That's the strange part about it.
The fair question to always ask when you're doing stuff is just, why am I doing this stuff, And so same deal with video games, same deal with playing a sport, same deal with going out and hanging out with friends, right? If you're doing any of those things because you're trying to escape yourself, then maybe need to work on yourself a bit, Well,
I think that's the interesting thing.
When you're ready.
When you're ready.
When you're ready too.
With games is that, especially growing up, I mean, this is the case for us, like, we've talked about this before, but kids and teenagers in particular are not given much of an opportunity to actually have something to do that's important or that feels like it has some impact.
Nobody's going to trust a teenager with anything super big.
Right. And so as a result, there's this huge void actually because people want meaningful stuff to do literally as soon as they're able to do stuff. So basically when you're like 7 or 8, you start wanting to contribute in some way. And so I think it's the case that when you're devoid of that, then you have to find something to fill the gap. And I think it's actually
people want pride and respect.
Right. I think it's interesting, at least for me personally, because the video game experiences that I had growing up were these interesting things where they sort of modeled what I wanted my day-to-day to feel like generally once I was an adult, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so you wanted to be a wizard and you wanted to
I wanted to shoot fireballs,
lots of
siphon
horrific
souls,
creatures, all that
just
stuff.
all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, and you also want to be the person where you just appear in a town somewhere and they're like, "Oh my god, thank you so much for being
arrived."
Here.
Yep.
your presence really matters to our humble village.
Because these fire sorcerers are siphoning our soul.
Yeah. And since you can shoot fire out of your hands, only you can deal with this.
Well, I mean it in the sense that when you hop into a video game, it's designed to produce certain feelings. One of which is we've talked about is pride, and also just a general sense of skill mastery, right? So then, later in life as an adult, when I'm able to structure my time and also choose those activities that might actually have an impact, I like to pick things that feel very similar actually to those sorts of things. So, we have our Trello system where we have all of our cards in there, and it's really fun it's like a quest log. When you think about it like that, it's just like a quest log. Same thing with all of your, tasks and stuff at home, whatever else. And so you can take this sort of video game bent to your life in general and say, okay, these aren't just a waste of time. They're actually giving me essentially a model that I can then build my own reality on top of. In a really good way.
So you're recommending gamification?
Yes.
Well, no, all the rage. Actually, no, it was all the rage last year, and then everybody forgot about it.
Now it's blockchain.
It's less gamification, more just recognizing that a well designed life is really what you're after, and like video games are this little tiny piece of that.
Yeah, where they're well designed and carefully controlled.
Yes.
Yeah,
and being able to create a life that feels similar to that, where you say, I've thought of the path to get from A to Z, and I know what the reward's going to be. I know sort of what this is going to look like, and then being able to kind of break that up into a bunch of sub quests, and then
so
go along with it.
This reminds me of This American Life had an episode on superheroes, and they're like, what is it that makes somebody a superhero? Because there's always like mutant spiders, and crap like that, gamma rays,
gamma radiation, which does not give you cancer and kill you, just turns you.
The Hulk, where you summon mass.
Well, I think if it doesn't kill you, then it turns you into the Hulk. It's one or the other sort of.
Yeah, so we've never.
Because everybody was very surprised. They're like, "How did you live through this?" And then he's like, "Well, I became the Hulk, and that was how I did it. That was how I did it.
That's just one strategy that you can use.
It's a pretty good strategy.
So they interviewed this woman who, when she was like 12, she had this sort of dream. She had these recurring dreams of herself like fighting villains and stuff in jungles and whatever. Her name was Zora, which is awesome. And then
it's like Zorro.
And she decided that she was going to model her life at like age 12. She decided she was going to model her life after what she envisioned a superhero would do. So she made a list of all the skills that she would need in order to be like a fully fledged superhero, including things like hand-to-hand combat, rock climbing, piloting helicopters, throwing stars, like literally all these things. And she did all of them. By the time she was in her mid-20s, she was like, I speak 4 different languages and like all this.
I could strike a fly from across the room with a pencil. Like,
yeah. And so, but literally all it was is she just made a list, and then she got like a notebook, right? And then in the back page of the notebook, she made the list of all the skills, and then every day she would
just work on
keep a journal basically of her progress, like a quest log. Keep a journal of her progress toward those skills. And so from the age of 12 to like 25, she mastered every superhero skill that you see deployed in like Batman. Right?
That's awesome.
So.
Yeah, it's funny. Actually, I met a person at one of these games conferences we were at. He's actually like a sales rep for one of the like VFX studios. And she and I got to talking, and she revealed that she had gone on a quest to become an Amazon over the course of a year. It was the same sort of thing where she was like, what would the skills be that an Amazon has? So she learned how to shoot a bow. I think she learned how to like dress game after
like how to hunt. Yeah.
And then worked on her stealth skills, which by that she meant she would tell friends to meet her somewhere and then try to scare the shit out of her. And then she just had like a little blog about it where she sort of chronicled the experience. But yeah, you could tell the way she was talking about it that it was such an active way to be living, right? Where you have a few of these things that you're just trying to figure out how to do.
But and the way that it was described in this this Zora story was she talked about it as having a personal mythology that she was trying to aspire to, right? So like if you created a myth about like what your ideal life would be in this kind of like magical terms, and then just think, how would I get even like 3% of the way there? What would that look like? So, I don't know. But that does kind of remind me of the idea of, you've got your quest log, you've got your missions. The trouble is these are all self-generated.
Yes.
And just as easily as you can generate them yourselves, you can also just throw them away yourself. So
yeah, having someone or a game system hold you accountable for stuff is very handy. But I think it's the case that you can use games as a model for what you want to do. And that's why I feel perfectly fine about it, because also we've gotten plenty of notes from people who said something along the lines of either, oh, this helped me escape at a very important time where I did not need to just be fully conscious and aware of all of the horrible stuff that was happening to me for some period of time. And there's also been people who've sent us notes about this sort of model, or there's some sort of modeling-esque behavior that they ended up pulling from a game of ours. So they're not just for escaping, I guess, at the end.
But even if they are,
it's part of reality that you can use.
It's part of your reality. But even if they are mostly used to escape, you also have to ask the question, is it causing harm by doing it? Because the implication would have to be that if only video games didn't exist, the people who are escaping with them would be doing something entirely different with their time. Well, they would be better or more real or whatever, which I think is horseshit.
Yes.
So,
yeah, people will escape into anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I've known a lot of people who I've met playing World of Warcraft who previously had big like drug problems, or they would go out to bars every night or whatever. And then once they started playing WoW, then they're playing video games every night instead, which is, it's not going to
a little bit better.
It's not going to kill them as fast. They're not going to end up in a treatment center or something like that. So, it's maybe a net positive. All right, next question comes from TheUglyTurnip. Why shouldn't I tip you?
Why should you not?
So I like this question because the implication is that, yeah, you should. And then TheUglyTurnip is like,
and he's like about to do it.
He's like, convince me not to, because I'm doing it. So all right. Why should you not tip?
And by tip, we're referring to going to moneygrab.bscotch.net and giving us money to help support the podcast.
Yes. Which, as we've discussed, this podcast is a money grab.
Yes.
Which is why the URL is moneygrab.bscotch.net.
That's why we spent 167 hours now sitting in here making like 12 cents an hour.
Yep. So now that we've done that.
Have we made that much?
Probably not.
So now that we've done that, why should people not give us money?
I think it's the case that...
well, I think for starters, we're going to keep doing this no matter what.
That's true.
You get to free ride.
That's true.
Whether you tip us makes no difference.
Well, you want to talk about, living a life that makes no impact also. Who wants to be responsible for anything? You don't want to throw money at something, because then what happens if it goes away,
what if you tip us, right? And then like 10 episodes from now, we reveal that we have all kinds of horrible ideas about the world.
Yeah.
And you're like, I should.
Now you're responsible for
that. Yeah, you made that happen.
With your dollar, probably.
You're like, I shouldn't have did that.
I think also, if you find people whose work that you love but you can get it for free, then why would you pay?
Why would you do that?
Why would you support the things you care
about? It's not like they need to eat, or keep lights on, or buy these fancy mics so that you don't complain when we're talking in a podcast.
Yep. Really, if people aren't doing the things, or aren't doing things just for the love and joy of doing them, really, if you give them money, you're dirtying.
You've corrupted it.
Basically,
it turns into a transaction.
Yeah, which is transactions gross. Are gross because
money. There's because of money.
Money involved. Yeah, I think
money is power, and power corrupts. I think we've
there we go. That's right.
There we go. Okay. The more money you give us, the more corrupted we get. There. Done.
So there's just a huge laundry list of reasons not to support this podcast. All right, next question. IMcade.
But if you choose to defy all those really good reasons, you should go to moneygrab.bscotch.net.
Yeah. There's a little corruption in your day to day.
I feel like
a little corruption in you.
I feel like maybe if a little bit of corruption is fine.
Keep it, it's a little edgy.
Actually, it's sort of like it's like boring.
Yeah, it's like the garnish. You gotta get a good steak, and then they throw that little piece of green on it.
Yeah, the little thingy,
a little sprig.
a microgreen, if you will.
Yeah. Also known as meal corruption. Yes, when they throw the garnish on the top.
So corruption is the spice of life, is essentially.
So really, it's a fine balance.
But as with all spices, you don't want to just eat it wholesale.
Because then then it's like the cinnamon challenge. You just take a bunch of corruption, you're just gonna be coughing if you put that in your mouth.
So I guess then the answer really is you shouldn't tip us because you enjoy super wholesome, very bland podcasts.
Yes. And that's corruption free.
And that's how you want it. And if that's how you want it,
Do not.
Then preventing us from being corrupted at all is the mechanism by which you would do that.
Yep.
Yeah, and in fact, you should probably start a campaign to make sure other people do the same.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Definitely.
All right. Also known as a protest or a boycott, I guess. So,
yes.
Yeah. All right, next question comes from imcade. Do any of you play D&D? Have you ever thought about doing a role-playing board game in the Crashlands universe?
Well,
I have played D&D on 2 occasions.
I have played it mayhaps 4 times.
Same.
My character was Klepsy, who was a thief who didn't actually want to steal things, but one of his middle finger on his right hand had been possessed by a demon.
And it was really long.
And it was really long, and it would just like try to get stuff. So he would just be talking to someone, and then his hand would kind of go over there, and his finger just kind of like sniffing around.
Finger.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think we recounted our studio D&D
way
event
back
on a long time ago.
Probably 100 episodes ago.
Yeah, we did talk about doing some sort of a Woanope Butterscotch universe.
Well, we had I think Quantum
game.
Anomaly was it,
Mm-hmm.
who came up to visit us actually in St. Louis and brought a Go Fish board game. Card game thing that he'd made in the Crashlands universe, which was awesome.
And it was based on the fish from Crashlands. So it was Crashlands Fishing.
Yep.
The card game.
Yeah, it was amazing. So
It was good.
we've seen a few of these where they whether it's fan made or even just some random ideas where they've been kind of cool. But yeah, the problem with board games is they are physical, so they require inventory.
Well, role playing games don't.
That's true.
So if we just did like D&D style.
That's true. We could just sell a PDF on the itch.
Yep.
But that would mean we'd have to still make it. So there's that. There's that extra small cost there.
Mm-hmm.
Though the bigger cost is really planning it all out.
Yeah, I think the problem with all these things is we are very much like a laser in that we can do one thing very intensely.
Yep.
And then we
nothing else.
Basically nothing else. Sort of collectively as a group.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, each of us has a handful of other responsibilities, but
But we mostly do them because we have to.
Yes, to stay alive and stuff like that. Yeah. So I think if we wanted to do something like that, I feel like we'd have to do that as like in between bigger video game projects or something.
We'd have to decide to do it and then deploy our full lobes upon it.
Yeah, but what would end up happening then is it would become a whole thing,
and then we'd make a video game out of it.
It would take 6 years to make.
Build a new website for it.
3,000 pages.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I don't know who has the time.
Although it could be a fun exercise, post level head for some sort of just a
little break,
mental, not a break exactly, but distancing and changing of frame.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I feel like it would really help me to forget a lot of things about programming.
That's also
during that time.
Yeah,
just to kind of like block that out.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Maybe someday. Probably not, but maybe someday.
Mm-hmm. Probably not though.
But probably not. All right, next question comes from doctordino. Hello, birders. Are you planning on doing season 2 of the GameDev documentary? Season 1 was really good, and just get in there.
Cool. Yeah. So we didn't make that.
Yeah. So this is a common misconception that we've been trying to get out from under, which is that's not ours.
Yeah. So Forever an Astronaut is the media company that made that, and they're actually down the street from us now that we're at our new office. And they're working on a bunch of new stuff. I know they had a short that they made that's about like a friend of a girl who becomes a robot, like mech creature thing.
Mm-hmm. This is that age-old tale.
Mm-hmm. A tale of love. Yeah. So they're doing all sorts of other cool stuff these days. And I know they pitched a season 2 of the Dev Diary thing a few times. I'm not sure exactly what sort of has come with it, but I know that they're actively doing a bunch of their own things. So we're not the ones who made it. That said, we did talk about potentially figuring out something as far as like a little mini-mentary, documentary.
Documentary.
Yeah, which would be following the launch of Levelhead, because that is sort of the most intense window, the intense couple of days there around launch, and it's also like very fraught with emotions and stuff because it's in this case your work. Is it going to actually be worth it, or does no one care?
Yeah. Well, honestly, even with the Crashlands documentary, they came about 3/4 of the way through development.
Yeah. Because
at that time you do have a story to tell.
Yes.
Right. Because anybody can start a project. That's not an interesting story. Mm-hmm. Right. It really, like Sam was saying, it gets interesting as it nears the sort of the climactic finale.
Right.
which is the launch.
But also the story for Crashlands was a lot more of a personal story because of all the cancer shit that Sam was dealing with and that then we were all dealing with.
Yeah.
This is
Levelhead is more just like everyone's fine.
Everyone's fine, and we're making this game.
We're making this game.
We're trying to do it good.
Yeah, and we're having a good time. But I don't know if that's that sort of aspect of the sort of compelling personal drama, is completely absent for anything like a sequel. And that was really actually the core thing about that original story.
Well, and I think we would probably be. I still feel like an underdog in the sense that compared to a lot of other games and studios, we are tiny tater tots.
Well, it also just still feels like most people don't know or care. Which I think until that balance shifts, then I'm always just going to feel like
we've reached that interesting middle ground where we have done some successful stuff, but compared to a lot of other other companies,
even other indies, we're still just like bottom of the barrel.
Yeah, and it's like when we go to GDC, we walk around with our Butterscotch shirts, and maybe like 1 in 30 or 40 people maybe knows any one of our games, right? Or we have to remind them. So
or they call it Crashlanders.
Yeah.
So it just stabs you in the heart a little bit.
There's like people. Yeah, so even at like industry events with 30,000 other developers, we struggle to find these like people who are really in the industry.
Which is fair though, because I know very few other developers.
Oh yeah, it's totally fair. But the whole point is that there's these different rungs.
There's echelons of success, and we're still
pretty low.
Right, because there are companies that everybody knows, right? And we are not one of those companies.
Absolutely not.
Yes. So, as far as then a documentary goes, we could make the thing, or we could basically pay somebody to come in and do interviews and make this kind of a thing. But we don't know really what the angle would be.
Yeah. But it might also just be interesting because this is actually one of the prime benefits of having that Crashlands documentary sort of in the background is because I haven't looked at it probably in the last year or so, but I remember I watched it, I think like a year and a half after the whole thing was done. And it was because I forgot most things because like all of us forget most things. Like we've talked about kind of living in dog time a little bit where yesterday didn't exist and today feels like 7 years and that sort of thing. Right. So it was actually really nice just to have it almost more like a historical piece, like a snapshot.
It's a time capsule.
It's a little time capsule. So
that's probably the approach we would take.
So I would want to do it just for my own.
Yeah.
Even if nobody else wants to watch it, it's like a scrapbook.
Yeah, right.
But I don't have to clip and put together. So that's a good. Yeah, maybe we should look into that.
That'd be fun.
And since we're kind of nearing the stage of Levelhead, which is about kind of where we were when we started the Crashlands documentary, then we actually have some interesting things starting to happen. Public information now about the game where we aren't trying to keep everything under wraps. So could be interesting. Let's look into that. Adam.
Yep, I'm doing it right now.
Right. Next question comes from Coffee Chemist. Hey, Bscotch Bros. I know you guys have given plenty of statistics in the past and would love to hear some more. What percentiles of the Bscotch community has each 10th level on Bscotch ID, I think, reached 10th level? How many people have beaten hardcore Crashlands on each difficulty? And how many deaths does the player with the most deaths have?
Wow.
So before we started this episode, I just went into the database just to like scrape out a few numbers.
You scrape it.
They're like on the walls.
Yeah, you got to kind of scoop them up.
That's the shitty thing about statistics is they're
very gooey.
They're very gooey and sticky, and you got to really get in there with like a spoon.
Yeah, it's really gross.
You got to wash them. You got to scrape them.
It's a whole thing.
It's a whole thing. It took Adam all morning before this podcast.
I was at it for like 5 minutes.
So data scientists have all that. They get tons of hazard pay. They wear hazmat suits when they go into a database because it's just like it's like going into a bee colony.
Yeah,
but with sticky stats.
In the mainframe, they got to get in there.
Yeah, the mainframe is an actual place that's covered in goo.
Real gross.
Yeah, people don't really often talk about that, but there is only one mainframe.
Yeah, we just all have to sort of rent space.
Yeah, and every sort of web admin or whatever you people call yourselves, they got to go. They got to make trips over there.
Yeah, the internet is actually just a bunch of tubes coming out of the
a bunch of tubes coming out of the mainframe.
It's like Stranger Things. Like, don't you have to step through like a really pulsating?
You have to go into the upside down. And
and then it's just stats, just all.
And then there's weird slugs coming out of your nose.
Yep.
But that's why web people get the big bucks.
It's true.
It's that hazard pay.
Yep.
So anyway, so you scraped up some goo.
So in the mainframe, I just went and picked some goo off the goo tree.
Yeah, the data globules.
And I got kind of distracted. So I was going to kind of answer some of these questions, but I got distracted by the last one, in part because that was the easiest one to answer. So I just kind of went in there, and so it's actually the only one I'm going to answer because it's also kind of interesting. So people are really into leaderboards and stats, trying to figure out what their players are doing. Right. The problem is that your players are liars.
Yes.
You know, for basically two reasons. One
is their people.
One is their people. Actually, that's the only reason. Yeah. But the thing that they do is they like to have more stuff. And so the top of any leaderboard, except in the most like DRM riddled games in the universe, outside of those, the top of any leaderboard is just people who are cheating.
Yes.
And that's true with our, so we don't even have leaderboards except for like the ones between friends. So there's no point in hacking it.
Yeah.
And yet people do, right? So this always makes for an interesting question. When you want to answer something about like, what are our players doing in the game? You have to somehow first get around the question of how is what I think they're doing based on these numbers being confused by the fact that a substantial fraction are cheating, especially when doing things like averages and whatever, because the cheaters are like jacking up values enormously or pushing them way, way down. So I went in, I was like, okay, what's the top number of deaths of players, right, in Crashlands? And no one will be surprised that the top numbers are all just the max integer value for that column, which is 65,000, whatever that max value is.
Because people are like, I want to be known as the person
who's died the most,
who died 65,000 times.
It's a very strange. It's a strange quest.
People, like we talked about earlier, people just want to be noticed.
They just want to have the biggest numbers.
They want those numbers.
And so there were a handful of those, but so I just looked at the top 20. And the top 20 had, so the top of them were like 60. The top two of those max integer values. The next ones were like still 60,000. There was like 30. So it dropped very, very quickly. But the top 10 were still all above like 10,000. But the question is, once you're not at the max integer value, then you have to ask the question, because people just submit big values. They like try to put the biggest value when they can. This is why one of the most obvious hallmarks of a cheater or a hacker is just a max integer value, because they just like put in an enormous number and they got stuck, right? But the ones that are less than that max number, now you have to answer the question: is this a cheater, or did they just like play a fuck ton of this game, right? So then you have to ask, okay, how would I know, right? And what evidence could I have for this? And so the next thing I looked at was, if I look at that same ranked list, but now also look at the deaths per minute of those users. So basically looking at their playtime too, and then compare that to kind of like what the overall population is doing. Because, players shouldn't be dying an outrageous number of times. So then in that case, now the person with the top number of deaths had only played for 3 hours. So, that kind of...
So they had something like
the worst 3,000 deaths per minute or something crazy.
Yeah.
Like that.
So either they're just somehow really bad at crashing.
They're dying multiple times per second.
Yeah.
They're dying like a machine gun. They're just like, I am so bad. Every time I respawn, I die 93 times.
Yeah. So that was not likely to be true, right?
It's not likely.
But that was the easy case. There were a few easy cases where it's just very obviously not correct. But now I have to answer the question like, okay, what's a reasonable death rate? Right. And so basically from looking at other people's numbers and stuff, I was like, okay, it looks like maybe something like, a death every like 5 minutes is probably like a reasonable kind of.
Right. Because this is an average over your entire gameplay.
Right.
Which means that, people who are new to the game and are playing early in a save, they don't have any armor, they don't know what to do, they might die even like once a minute.
Well, plus actually, if you're playing on challenge or ludicrous mode, because if you get breathed on,
it's very easy
by a creature, then you die.
Yeah, but it takes about a minute to just like die and then respawn.
But you got to find something that's gonna kill you.
Yeah, so it just takes some time. So I figured if anyone's dying more than once a minute, then that's almost definitely somebody hacking. So I was basically going through this game to try to figure it out. So the best I could come up with was that the top person who I can't tell if they're an obvious hacker. Because the numbers are reasonable, but still outrageous.
It's right on that line.
Yeah, as in they're correlated with each other, right? Because somebody could also hack all the numbers and hack them just right so that they still all seem
to fly under the radar,
proportionally reasonable.
It seems like too,
but nobody does that intentionally, right? They just want the biggest numbers. So this is my rationale trying to.
Well, that is true. That is a hallmark of hacking. Is hackers will pick one thing.
Yeah.
So we'll be like, okay, they've got 33,000 healing potions.
Yeah.
And that's the one thing that they did, right?
Yeah.
And so, and nothing else about their save including playtime or anything, would imply that that was a feasible thing that they did. Right?
Well, yeah, in fact, when we're back when we had to do a lot of support stuff for Crashlands, we would pull down people's saves, try to figure out what the hell was going on. The hallmark we would look for was they would have no health potions of any kind in their hotbar, but would have an enormous number of bombs.
Yep.
And that was just like such a perfect signature of a hacker.
Because they are doing something to give themselves God mode or whatever.
Yep.
And infinite bombs.
Yep.
Right.
So it is, which is all to say it is possible.
Hackers are not subtle.
No. Because why would they be, right?
Yeah.
They don't have a real goal.
What did you find? Well, give me the answer.
So the most the top one that is possible as possibly being real had 3,300 deaths over 750 hours of gameplay.
750.
See, that's the thing. Is that's a lot of hours of gameplay, but all the other numbers that were in this person's stats were all like proportionally reasonable for that amount of time.
That would be, I mean, let's see, it takes about 40 to 60 hours.
Yeah. So it's like 20 playthroughs.
Yeah. So a hacker isn't going to go, how are these numbers correlated? And
amongst the normal population.
Yeah. And let me just amp up all of my numbers to proportionally, not to the maximum integer limit, but just to like a high number and then elevate the rest of them to also somewhat match.
Well, I have a question for you. Because this is supposed
it's possible, but not necessarily likely that this is real.
I'd say I'd call it real. I'd say that's probably
well. This is supposedly data science, but what I just heard you doing, Adam, was guessing a whole bunch.
Yeah,
but
if you're not guessing when you're doing data science, you're doing it wrong.
So is it really data science or is it just data guessing?
Science is just guessing. So yes.
Yeah, I mean, when you get into that, when you get into the mainframe,
here's the thing. There's nothing inherent. There's no magic you can do with numbers, so that the thing that you get on the other side is an objective measurement of reality. That cannot ever be.
As soon as you've made a choice about what to measure or whatever.
Yes, and as soon as you had a way to measure it, and as soon as a number came into existence, that number actually has opinions about how it was formed.
So I heard a great quote about GDP.
Yeah.
So GDP, gross domestic product, is the number that is supposed to represent the health of an economy. Right. And really it basically just comes down to the sum total of all the sort of end income that everybody made in an economy. Right. And GDP is used for all kinds of analysis, all kinds of predictions, whatever. But it only measures one thing. And that thing is very limited. And so I had this great quote about it, which was when we talk about GDP, we think we are measuring what we observe. But really, we're just observing what we measure.
Yes.
Right.
That is absolutely 100% correct.
Yeah.
And that's how science, which takes us back to a couple dozen minutes ago or whatever, when we said you can't know anything. Right.
Right.
So the hallmark of a really good data scientist, or really good scientist in general, is having a strong mental model about how the world works and how things are related to each other, so that when they do go through their numbers, they know how to think about what those numbers mean, and they know which ones they should be throwing away and why, or reinterpreting or normalizing or something. And of course you can't do this in a sneaky way where you're like trying to get the answer you want, right? But it's all about trying to understand what your numbers mean, so that you can interpret them relative to something you believe that you understand,
or to discern whether or not you're missing something, like you're missing some other numbers that would explain it, right? Because if what you've measured, so for example, if you say, well, GDP is the most important measure of a nation's success, right?
Yep.
But then why would it be that the countries with the highest GDP also perform poorly in education or in health or in happiness or violence or any other conceivable metric?
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Which means when you have software that's trying to catch hackers, how advanced and complex that software has to be, because it basically has to form an opinion based on all of the data about what things that aren't cheaters look like, so that you can then see if somebody is an outlier. We always ask the question, how far do you have to go from being an outlier? Because they're also like, if you get because we have data points now for whatever it is, it's like 400,000 people for Crashlands, right? So with that many people, for any given number you want, there's going to be an outlier, and a pretty crazy one. And that makes identifying hackers very, very hard, right? Because
are they hackers, or do they just love it?
Or are they just an outlier, right? Yeah. Are they just that one person who just, like, for whatever reason, had something they wanted to do and spent literally 12 hours like trying to defeat the same enemy right next to their base over and over and over again, so they were actually able to die more than once per minute or whatever, right, for hours. because when you get enough people, some fucking person did that, you know?
Yep.
And so that makes it very, very hard to catch these things and figure out what's real and what's not.
This is a big problem in Levelhead that we got to figure it out.
Because we have leaderboards in Levelhead.
Every level that you publish,
Yep.
every other player in the universe can compete for score and time, right? So,
which honestly just means it's going to be hackers on the top of everything. That's just what's going to happen, which is a bummer.
That's why we got to figure out something.
Yeah, the best. But and this brings us back to the questions we've also talked about in the past. Like, how do you, once you identify a hacker or a cheater or whatever, what do you do?
I'm a fan of kind of like ghosting them in the sense, you let them keep playing, but in a way that doesn't actually spill over into anybody else.
Right. So basically, you'd probably stop allowing them from posting high scores, right? Except now, of course, all these systems, because like the system that we have in place right now is very simple. You get a putative high score, you submit it to the server. The server's like, cool, this is higher, I'm going to keep it. Or no, it's not.
But the server never goes, is this unreasonably high?
Well, it doesn't ask that question, and it doesn't ask an additional question, which is this user who submitted this in a blacklist somewhere that says they're not allowed to submit scores? Because if we need that mechanism, now all of a sudden every single request to do that has to first go through a blacklist and find out is somebody in there. And as that blacklist grows, it becomes more and more costly every time we're trying to do the same simple action of just trying to post a high score. And so the cost of this basically makes it so that everybody's experience doing anything is now worse and slower. Our costs are higher, and we have to store more shit in our database.
Hooray!
Which is
that's why I love the lazy devs thing. People are like, "Why don't you put leaderboards in your game, you lazy devs?" And it's like,
because of you, because of all you cheaters.
Well, it's just not quite. It's not as simple as it would have first appeared, as most things are.
Yeah, so. And so what it really means is that once the game goes live, I'm going to be doing a whole bunch of analytics in the background, trying to come up with a model that identifies cheaters, right? And it has to be, and then we have to come up with a punishment system that makes it so that we can err on the side of catching people who aren't cheaters. Because if we let too many cheaters through, then it ruins everything, which means we actually have to err on the side of catching people who aren't cheaters.
Well, and we can do more sophisticated stuff on the game side.
Yeah.
Where if you're trying to send something off to the server through the game because you've hacked your game, then we can run some checks, locally. And then we can also,
which is true, because so Crashlands doesn't actually do any checks of any kind. So if somebody goes in memory and then says, I now have 1,000 bombs by just changing some in memory value from 10 to 1,000, right? Then Crashlands isn't doing anything to check for that. And it's not checking a save afterwards to like look for
weird
characteristics of people hacking their saves.
Right.
So there are things that we can definitely do. But again, now these cost a bunch of dev time for Seth to implement them there. And so, but we are going to have to do it because we want leaderboards.
And I mean, this is always, I mean, there's those articles about Overwatch, not just about cheating, but about toxic player behavior and stuff. And it's just, about half of your dev time, if you're making any game, like a game with online components, is going to go into trying to find ways to keep players from ruining other players.
Yeah, we've even been entertaining the idea of not allowing players to have custom names for their levels. So we probably are going to allow that. But the problem is so serious, and we actually don't know what our solution is yet, that we are still entertaining and keeping as an option the possibility that we'll just provide a set of like symbols or a collection of words.
Or just a randomized word list. Yeah.
Or even just we will randomly name the level ourselves or something like that to prevent people from just being asses. Yeah. All
right. So people could maybe like hit a button to re-randomize the level name,
right,
or something. But
because that way we can guarantee that it's not. We might still make it, because it turns out that in any given culture, like we found out one of our people testing the website with Rumpus, because you get a randomly assigned username in Rumpus, was a French person who got in their username the word pigeon. So they were like something pigeon, right? And it turns out that at least according to this person, that pigeon is a horrible insult in France. It's a horrible thing to call a person, right? And I went through the list because I have all these animals in there. So
it's just but it's just an animal.
Yeah. So
like,
I got rid of like all the things that I know, because in American culture we have the same thing, right? Because I got rid of like pig and like anything that sort of is used to like sort of mock a person's weight or something.
Right.
Although we do still have manatee.
I got rid of that one.
Okay, good.
Yeah, but there were a few that I didn't think about the first time through.
Right.
And so then a few days ago, I went back through again and like paired the list.
Basically, any farm animal, you want to take that out.
Yeah.
You want to just keep like majestic animals.
Yes. Exactly.
Eagles.
Yep.
swans.
And so
basically birds.
But think about how hard it is, right? So think about how hard it is to us to create just like a wholesome list of things that we can guarantee are going to not be offensive, right?
This is literally just the names of animals.
This is just names of
because
animals.
people have ruined the names of animals.
And now give full freedom to just all the people to just name things whatever they want,
and in languages that we don't speak.
Exactly.
We
can't even tell how offensive things are.
Mm-hmm.
And so our options are basically we have to find some service we can hook things up to. And I originally did have a profanity filter on the username selection for the new Rumpus system. But it was too aggressive and also missed stuff because there's no way to have it not.
So it was
there's
both,
just no way.
So it was both too restrictive, but also not restrictive.
Yeah, because like it included hell as a bad word, which fine, whatever. I disagree, but it's just in there. I'm not going to fuck with it. Except that also hello because it has hell in it is a bad word now. And so there,
right.
And it doesn't, and it handles like a very small fraction of leet speak versions of things. And people have spent decades now coming up with clever ways to put profanity in places it's not supposed to be.
Stop the tide.
At some point, we're all just going to have to agree that we can't stop this, and we have to figure out other.
Well, and that was again why we are seriously entertaining the idea of not allowing people to name stuff.
Yeah,
now I will say in the game that I'm developing on the Twitch stream, I came up with a random name generator for space stations, and it has come up with some hilariously spectacular because I basically made an archive of sort of syllables, but that come in a certain sequence, and I kind of vetted them to make sure that they don't generate a sequence that creates a real word or a profane word or whatever.
Yep.
So we got some pretty good ones.
Well, even our so in Rumpus you get a random sequence of letters, numbers as a user ID, just like your permanent ID, right? And even that I run through that really out of control profanity filter. I run it through that because I'm like, I don't care if it thinks hello is a bad word, right? Because I want to make sure that somebody doesn't get assigned like hell, fuck, or whatever as their user ID.
Just fuck.
But the fact that we have to pay this close of attention to it, and then that our players could just ruin all of our careful work of making a nice wholesome experience for people.
Well, I think there's basically this question of what's the balance of proactivity and reactivity, right?
Yeah.
So I think we don't want to be in the circumstance where we are just playing the reactive game, also because it's actually a lot more work on our plate,
very costly
on the back end,
yeah.
And so that's. But you do want people to be able to express themselves in some way, but ideally one that doesn't cause problems. And so this is something we talk about a lot in the studio, especially with Levelhead, because there's so much of sharing content.
I should look into that name generator and see if I can co-opt it, because
I mean, even
I get names like Duck Fuzz Cram Slap Institute or something. It's just like. That's great.
Yeah, because if we had a really good random name generator that had ended up with a huge selection of outcomes that people could re-roll.
Right. But yeah. And if it's like somewhat incoherent but kind of funny and has some kind of a vibe.
Because the fact is that names don't actually mean much in the context of like naming a level anyway, right? Yeah. But we have the same problem with usernames too, right? Because we show a username on currently anyway, we show usernames in there, and you can go on our website, for the Rumpus website, you can change your username to whatever. Currently I've turned off the filter because it's too out of control, and so right now people could technically put anything they want to, and so what do we do about that? Right? And we entertain the same idea of just only showing the user ID, just that random sequence of letters and numbers, and then just providing random names within the context of Levelhead. Which we could do because we could use that as a seed to then use another random name generator that gives you a random Bureau of Shipping.
Right. But then you don't have a circumstance where you can say, oh, do you follow such and such person?
Well, you still, if the name was likely to be unique
and seeded from something.
And seeded from that thing.
Right.
So you still could, but now it's not a user choice, which now kind of sucks.
So this is where we have placed ourselves.
We did this
by making
to
a
ourselves.
UGC game.
Yep.
But we also believe that, what's the benefit? Because why are we doing this? Why are we putting ourselves through this? It's because we believe that by having the multiplayer component and having the ability to share things with your friends, play levels with your friends.
Yeah, well, I think that
it just blows the lid off the whole experience.
The connectivity is the thing. We've always talked about we want to make currently. I mean, Crashlands is certainly it's a good game, but it's not the sort of thing you can really get around with your friends or even with the community in some interesting ways. And so the idea here is to do more of the bonfire approach, where it's let's build a thing that people can actually essentially hang out around, and that's going to be true in a literal sense in terms of being on the Switch, because people can
gather
sit
around
it.
Yeah.
which is going to be awesome, or on Steam if you play co-op on Steam. So there's that, and then there's the sort of asynchronous sense of that too, which is if you share levels with friends or whatever else. So that is exactly what we want, and we know that it's essentially one of those things where, like, the beautiful thing about people is the connections between them, and also the horrifying thing about people is the connection between them. So
yeah, and our responsibility as the designers of this experience is to make it so that we don't let the horrible part come through. Somehow we have to truly
as much as possible, because the truth is, like, you can't. Well,
you can't. Yeah, you can't have it not. But I think if your design includes the acknowledgement that this is a problem that you don't want,
yes,
then I think the degree to which you can design against it, you have to give stuff up, right? So, like, you might have to give up letting users have full control over naming themselves or over naming the things that they create.
Mm-hmm.
But if you still give them some sense of control, so again, like, they can keep on re-rolling as much as they want until they find something they like,
right? Because
that means that now they have chosen this, they have created this, right. and so there's still a sense of self-expression there. But yeah, people have asked us before, like, hey, would you let us upload our own avatars? It's like,
no.
Fuck no,
absolutely
never.
Not.
We will never let anybody do that.
Then it'll just be
penis and swastikas everywhere. And no, we're not.
Stop.
We're not going to.
And now we will be arrested.
Yeah,
because there will also be. Yeah, there's what Facebook employs like 16,000 people who moderate the images that people upload. And this is just the images that get reported, not all the images, right?
Yeah.
And those 16,000 people have to approve or disapprove one image every 4 seconds during their entire 8-hour shift
of mostly offensive content.
Yep. Yeah. The stuff that
the human cost to all of this is just
too high.
And so.
Well, the funny thing is, I mean, so Seth, even the current random name generator we have for the levels is already pretty fun.
Oh, yeah.
Because I think last week I had one called a Balmy Ruse.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had another one that was a Nefarious Pillar, which just was like a good, weird
combo.
And
the nice thing about it is if you're given those names from the outset when you go to make a level, it actually serves as inspiration for what your level could be,
Yeah, and a lot of the words that we currently have come from the biome that the level started with. So, like, the jungle ones get like balmy and leafy and stuff like that, and then the desert ones get like sandy and dry and hot, scorching. And then depending on the shape of the level, if it's a taller level, then you might get things like pillar or climb or whatever. And if it's a long level, you might get like, jaunt or sprint or whatever.
Right. So if it's well crafted, it has to do a little bit with the content that's in there. Then it can still be a good thing.
Yeah, we just don't want to be the case that our jobs after level head are about removing Nazi shit from.
Yeah, you know what? We should
really don't want to do that.
We should maybe work on that level random name generator and just take it down.
Really
that
do
road.
it. Yeah.
Okay, let's just do that.
Also, for usernames.
No, I think usernames are. I think we need to think more about that in particular.
I think it's exactly the same.
It's the same problem, but
it is, except for the fact that people can only have one username, but they can publish tons and tons of levels.
Yep,
right.
That is true.
So I don't know if that changes anything.
I don't know. I mean, how would you feel? How would you feel if you logged into a service and they're like, your name is now Carrier Pigeon 667?
Well, no. That's the wrong. It's all about framing, right? Because so you boot up your game, you make your character, right?
Mm-hmm.
So almost nobody names their character the same as like their Steam username. That's not a thing that people do, right?
Sure.
Some people, sure, fine. But usually you go into a game like, so I think like in Terraria, I've got like 5 characters all with completely random weird names, right?
Mm-hmm.
In World of Warcraft, I've got Wadoopadoop as my character, right?
Which is a good one.
Is good. So I've actually used that in other ones too because I like them. But if I had gone into those games and I was making my character and whatever, and I was like choosing a faction and choosing the stuff, and then I just rolled a name because that way the name fit in with the universe I was in, right? And then I was playing now as that character. Like it would all seem so consistent to me that I wouldn't be bothered by the fact that I didn't get to just choose whatever ass thing I want, right? Because it's about the framing and the consistency. So if we go into level head and like the first thing you see is a character selection screen where you choose the kind of alien you are, right? Well, aliens don't just have like English names or just like the names of horrible profanities, right? So because they've all got their own cultures.
Well, there is that one.
And whatever.
There's that one species of alien where everybody's name is John.
Yeah,
but other than them,
yes. And there's also that other alien species that were there in conflict, and all of their names are just fuck John.
Yeah, they all hate John.
They all hate each other
so much.
Yeah. So which even could be a joke. We could have an alien species where you just only can be named John, or so. But the point is that we could have a character selection process where we now like have all this lore and history and whatever. And if we have still a huge selection of names that come through random generation, where you can roll it, so you still have a sense
I can see
choice,
that in the context of Levelhead, but Levelhead uses your Rumpus.
It uses your Rumpus ID, but it doesn't need to use your Rumpus username because you can't look somebody up by Rumpus username anyway. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
That's true.
So somebody could choose a username on the website because, once a person goes on to the actual internet in a browser, they know they're in Wild West territory now, right? If somebody buys a game in the Nintendo eShop and then gets on to play it with their like 3-year-old or whatever,
There's
right?
a bunch of Nazis dicking around.
Yeah, this is a highly curated, like wholesome ecosystem. This is also honestly like where I think our game should live, is in that super, the gleeful, wholesome ecosystem space, right? And so we can separate these concepts out just fine, where the user ID is the thing that you carry around with you that's consistent through all of the things that we make. But there's no reason why your username that you've selected on our website should appear in Levelhead and in Crashlands and in some other game as the same thing, because that only makes sense if those don't mean anything in the context of the game, right?
Right.
So if we want to just tie everything together and make it all consistent, then we can still get away with not letting people name themselves in the context.
Sure. As long as we got a good random generator that lets people guide it, in certain ways,
and still have a choice, some sense of choice.
That's true. So we got a lot of things to think about.
Yeah.
All right. Speaking of design, we got one more question. I think we got time for it. Yeah. Which is about Talfight.
Oh,
okay. This question
Blast from the past.
This question is from a street sign. So I don't know how
they usually just tell you. They usually just declare things.
Yeah.
So I'm impressed.
This is a really elaborate street sign.
An inquisitive sign.
So
it's probably not a stop sign.
Yeah, I read this on one of my commutes yesterday, one of my 4 commutes on the street sign. So the question is, don't be like Valve and release Talfight 3 already. I know it's just sitting there on Sam's desk.
How did he know?
What would you change gameplay-wise if you were to remake Talfight 2 today?
We have talked about this.
We've talked about this a lot. We've talked
on
about
the podcast or just
internally.
Okay. I remember nothing. So.
Yeah, we've talked about remastering Talfight in particular, as well as potentially Quadrupus. But the problem is that anytime we talk about remastering it, it's the opportunity cost.
It just turns into a sequel.
Yeah, it turns into a sequel, and then it's like, well, why are we if we're just going to make another game, why would we make Talfight 3 instead of like Crashlands 2 or something?
Which we're not making, so don't
read into it. But if we were to do it, then yeah. So I think with Talfight, what we would change, that game is ugly. One.
All right, so what is what's the for those who haven't played Talfight?
Okay, so Talfight.
What's the core premise?
The core premise is that you shoot animals out of your face.
Yeah.
It's literally it. So
straightforward.
You wander around. It's sort of like a Zelda-like top-down thing. Actually, kind of
like a Binding of Isaac.
Yeah, but it's like a Binding of Isaac sort of game where you wander around and you find these different what are called projectiles, which are these magical animals that you have in your monocle, and then you fire them out to defeat various enemies. And it's got 12 bosses in it. It's like I think it's about like an 8-hour thing, and like 50 collectible projectiles, and then you can customize your clip. And so your clip auto rotates every time you fire one. It moves on to the next animal in your clip. And so you can have, it basically ends up being this just chaos generator, right? And yeah, it's lightly modeled mechanically on the Binding of Isaac, and then it starts getting into weird like Zelda territory and other stuff. So honestly, it's still very fun. It just has plenty of design problems in terms of breadth. So there's basically only one thing to do in the game, which is to shoot animals out of your face. Mm-hmm. And while you get the new projectiles that are more powerful or less powerful, they don't have any.
There's no other loops attached to them.
Yeah,
there's no like leveling up.
Right. There's not a lot going on beyond the basic premise.
Well, and because this was our first game, so we pulled a lot from other similar games. So we did stuff like we used the little heart system, like you see in games like Zelda, where you can get hit 6 times and then you die, and then maybe you get like a new heart. Now you can get hit 8 times and then you die.
This actually is something I found interesting about Breath of the Wild, because they have the heart system, but enemies will do more than a hit of damage to you. Which actually makes it very confusing sometimes, because I'll run up to someone and they'll just one-shot me.
They'll just hit you for 9 hearts.
And I'm like, what are these hearts? What does it mean?
Yeah. And so, when we made Crashlands, of course, we had this very fluid stat system where you can have anywhere from 50 HP to 138,000 HP, and enemies deal damage based on resistances and elements and level and all kinds of other stuff, which, of course, allows for all kinds of really interesting combos. And so one of the things I think we missed in Talfight was the idea of making projectile, of putting things into your monocle that augment certain play styles, because everything in your monocle is a projectile.
Yeah.
Right. So as it cycles through its sort of 6-shooter thing, everything that you do shoots something out.
As opposed to being something else.
Yeah, like it'd be interesting if you had one that was like, it just charges you up, for a second, and now you like have lightning around you,
right?
Or maybe like
we kind of have that because you got like the turtle shells and the mantises.
Yeah, some of the projectiles end up being, and those are the most interesting ones.
Actually. But I want to have some that, for example, like I want to have a projectile that says, any projectile that's fired in the next 2 shots, will have its electrical damage boosted by double or something like that.
So that way you can basically sort of sacrifice a slot
to charge up.
But you choose the position so you can use it to make combos.
Because what we didn't take advantage of is that the monocle rotates through the projectiles in a certain order.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't really capitalize on what that could mean in terms of like building up a sequence, like a combo of moves.
Yeah. And especially because that becomes basically the thing where you want to somehow manage to lay down consecutive fire on something in a particular order, which means that if we blew out that concept, then you could have that revolver style 6-shooter thing could blow up into like a 12 or 14 shot thing. That then the placement of each one of those projectiles is really important for the overall.
There's this interesting combinatorial complexity, and
right? And especially if some of them open up weaknesses on an enemy, for example. Yeah. So instead of just being a thing that you get passively, if for example if you hit someone with this projectile, then the next projectile that hits them does X or whatever. Yeah. Because then you have this. You want to somehow maintain line of sight with the enemy, which is always the dangerous thing because they get you. That's where they get you. Always want to maintain line of sight and sort of keep on hitting consecutive shots with someone, which is basically like the core of the game just wasn't quite extracted in a really
there was not enough interplay between the projectiles. And I also think because we didn't really know how to make an effective kind of inventory system, then we weren't able to capitalize on creating interesting limits or constraints on the projectiles. So, for example, we just said you can use unlimited frogs because they kind of suck.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can use only one of every other projectile that you find. So you find a Sasquatch, you got one Sasquatch. Mm-hmm. You find a Slender Man, you got one Slender Man.
There.
Right?
Forgot about that.
Yeah. That's a great one, by the way.
Yeah.
So if we had changed it so that you could sort of chain effects together and all that stuff, then that would open up the possibility of saying like, you just start with 6 frogs. You have 6 frogs. It's not that you use unlimited of them, right? And then instead, if you found an extra goat, then you could put 2 goats in your, or whatever.
Neat.
So there's all kinds of really interesting stuff we could have done, but we just we were very fresh.
Yes,
we were very new to design, and
that is the reason why we keep coming back to it. Because I still think the core of that design is super interesting and weird.
Oh yeah,
you basically
very cool.
Well, you got the collection aspect. You've got just the twin stick stuff.
You've got strategy of building this clip. Like it's really fun and weird.
Yeah.
And then the boss fights were rad. Actually, compared like the boss fights, that was sort of actually a lot of the dev time went into those 12 different boss
fights. They felt
a
lot like kind of some like old timey Game Boy.
Yes,
like Nintendo.
You're trapped in a room.
Fights. Yeah,
and each boss does like one big thing. That you have to figure out how to get around.
Yeah, they still kill the crap out of you oftentimes, which is funny.
Yeah,
they're not complicated.
And we also had those dungeons that you'd go into. Mm-hmm. I think we had it so that if you fucked it up, then you're just like locked out.
No. Yeah, for a day or something like that.
For a day. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, the door closes and then you can't go back in for a while.
This is one of those problems where it's just like as we've built more games, because there's also tons of jam games that we have where we look back and we're like, we could
so cool.
We could blow that thing up. Like I'm pretty sure that would be a good one. But you just have to choose what is actually a feasible market.
Maybe
project.
a new Telefight would be a pretty cool one.
It would be weird.
I
know it would be weird.
Here's what we do.
If Levelhead does really well so that we don't have to worry so much about how successful the next title is,
then we make Telefight.
Sure.
Yeah. We'll just spend 2 years. We'll be like, well, I hope
it does well. Who cares?
Okay. Here's an alternative. In Crashlands 2, you can craft a monocle
and then put projectiles in it.
So we put Telefight into Crashlands 2.
Yes.
We put Telefight 3 into Crashlands.
Here's what we do. There's a scene in Crashlands 2 where all of a sudden you become imprisoned by one of the Viru.
Yeah.
And you find on the ground the lens. You equip it. Boom, you're playing Telefight 3 now.
Yeah. Okay. And you have to beat Telefight 3
to get back into Crashlands 2. And then there will also be a scene where you slip and you fall into a puddle. Turns out it's actually a deep well. Now you're playing Quadrupus 2.
You have to beat it to get out.
You got to beat that to get back out.
What's what I realized about most of these huge games that are AAA actually they're just a collection of games that are well balanced between the whole experience.
I still remember watching my wife play. I can't remember which game it was. Something where you start off on a boat. And there's a whole like overseas journey part. But in that overseas journey, you're just like talking to people on the boat, basically. But it includes you can sit down and play these old ass games, these like old ass board games with wooden
pieces,
boards and pieces and things. And you can just sit down with randos on this boat, and you can play entire games with them.
Do you play like chess with someone for like an hour?
Yeah, but it's like weird chess, you know. So, but something like real games that existed historically from like the 1800s or whatever. And so you can just sit down and you play this entire game, you know, with dialogue with these people and whatever. And you can play them multiple times, and you know, so you can do all this kind of stuff just on the boat ride over to the actual game. And then once you get off the boat, you don't get to play those games ever again. But I remember, like, I was watching that happen, and I was thinking to our world of indie games, and especially on because we were at the time we were like all in mobile, right? Where the scale and scope of games on mobile is basically just that part. It's just that board game. But in the world of AAA, that's just a little
team of
appetizer.
10 making that. Put it on a boat.
Just to throw it away when they get into the actual game.
And we talked about this a bit with Nintendo with Super Mario Odyssey,
where
they will make a mechanic that you learn how to use it,
and just use it
once,
and
then they throw it away after literally 5 minutes.
Yep.
And it's just
you throw your hat onto like a stretchy caterpillar thing.
That was my favorite thing.
One level.
Yep, one level you use it, and then you never use it again. And it's like I love it. I love it because you get this huge variety in terms of the gameplay experience.
Yeah.
That they pull out of that one mechanic. But in the indie world, that caterpillar,
that's a whole
that
game.
would be a whole game.
Yeah.
It's actually Snakebird is basically what it is. So, which is fantastic, by the way. So yeah, it's
so it's really So the difference between like a AAA title and an indie title is, aside from graphical fidelity, is then
just scale.
It's basically just how many games there are in the game.
Yes. Yeah.
Because even a game like Knights of the Old Republic, the old RPG from the Xbox days, original Xbox, it's you go around in the world, you're a Jedi, you know, you're talking to people, whatever. And then you also have this card game called Pazak. And everywhere you go, there's people wanting to play you in cards, and then you can collect cards and you build a deck. It's a deck building game, and there's actually an entire version of that game set in the Star Trek universe. It's a mobile game. It's a whole game, right? But that was inside of Knights of the Old Republic. Yeah. And then they also have Swoop Bike Racing, which is a racing game that they just kind of put in there as well, which every planet you go to, there's a swoop bike track, and you can go and like do that for extra cash and
win some prizes.
Yeah, win some side items and stuff like that. You know.
But the interesting thing about it is that the games that do this really well, the balance between all of those
are real. Those are always really simple.
So I've been playing Breath of the Wild quite a bit, and this is actually something I noticed because there's a ton of stuff going on in terms of these various game elements or almost full games that are interacting in there, but the balance between them is so good where you might be doing one thing. So, for example, you can cook in the game, and you might do that for like 15 minutes at a stretch, and then for like 3 hours, you run around fighting stuff or exploring or whatever else, and the overall balance between all those different sort of ways that you can interact with the game world is so on point that it feels similar to like a Super Mario Odyssey thing where you're always kind of doing something else. You're not just doing the same thing over and over again, which I think generally is kind of the feel of indie games as a thing. And it's also a critique we've had for Crashlands, right? Where it's like, people are like, yeah, you just kind of...
You do one thing.
You do the same, and it's like, yeah.
That's true. You do.
It's true. Yeah.
It's all we could pull off at the time.
But. Well, this is something that we had been struggling with on Scuffle Buddies.
Yes.
Is basically there's these little mini game concepts or these sort of side games work really well when they're simple. Basically, you play the core game, which has a lot of learning and skill mastery and stuff. And then every now and then you can pop into these mini games that have very simple rules, and that you can remember easily how to play, and the progress isn't necessarily sort of like tracked between sessions so that you don't forget. Because like you ever play an RPG and then you save it, then you come back a week later and you're like, where the fuck
was I doing?
Am I?
Yeah, you've got your quest log. It's got like 100 open quests
and
on it.
You never like pick up a chessboard and you're like,
halfway
where the
in.
fuck was I in this? No, like because it's every game starts the same and it's very it's very understandable. So the trouble we've been having with or we were having with Scuffle Buddies was the problem of the core game is this collecting strategy, battle, card, capture the flag
thing
that's very involved mentally to kind of track and figure out what to do and strategize. And then we also want to have an open world where you go out into the world and you're exploring and you're collecting things and harvesting and crafting and all this other stuff. And we were just having a hell of a time striking a balance between those because now you have two really complicated game systems.
Well, basically, what we found is we couldn't. And that's actually where we were like, let's pick up something else for a while. Because
we need to let this sit for a minute.
Yeah, what ended up happening was that the strategy and the collection aspect of the sort of battle and card game was already so big and so heavy that balance, like we couldn't, there was no sense of balance to have something equally heavy, actually, which is sort of where we were trying to go with the open world versus a game where, like I played Slay the Spire recently, and they have the really intense card game that you're playing, which is strategy and all this stuff. And then their overworld it's just a map that you click on various symbols to go through and travel through. And they might have little things pop up, kind of like FTL style, where there's a an event that you can go participate in some way. But there's not really anything. There's just nothing really happening out there in terms of you having to do it.
That would be too much.
It'd be too much. And we thought, okay, well, this thing's really heavy. We need to put another really heavy thing in here to balance it out. That's probably the wrong.
Nope.
But it took about 4 months after taking a break on it to realize that was probably what was happening. So
yeah,
that's why I'm taking breaks.
So yeah, if you are having a struggle with that in any game that you're making, think about that problem of if you've got one really involved game system, then you don't balance it by adding more really involved game systems. You can add a large diversity of simple games, but yeah, don't go too hard in one direction. All right, so that's all the time we have for this week. We'd like to thank our producer, Fat Bart, for making us sound good. Thanks to our community moderators who keep our Discord running. If you'd like to get more involved in the Butterscotch community, you can hop into our Discord server, which is at discord.gg/bscotch, and come say hey. Also, if you'd like to adorn your body with Butterscotch merch, you can check out our shop over at shop.bscotch.net. We've got t-shirts, mugs, stickers, posters, all kinds of stuff. Also, if you'd like to send us something, we do have a mailbox, which you can find the address for over at mailbox.bscotch.net. And if you'd like to buy us a cup of coffee to help support the podcast, you can do so over at moneygrab.bscotch.net. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.